Now, what do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? What do we want? Women's sex-based rights. Come on. What's the matter with you? Stand up. Stand up for women's rights. Thank you, Anna. And I want to thank everyone here who's under 60, including the 6-month-old Georgina. I'm glad they're starting young. Now, you should each get a gift from the Lavender Menace, which is my pseudonym. And we will be having a quiz later, and the winners will get some shoelaces to help you walk your talk. And I'm doing the merch first. And then you'll also have received the leaflet, which has just got a few bits and pieces to save me sprogging them all now. Okay, where are we up to? Right, what do we mean by women's activism? Now, I'm saying women's, not just feminists, because there's a lot of women who do stuff without necessarily having a strong feminist analysis. But guess what? After a while, it starts to trickle through. And there are some groups who don't call themselves feminist, but by Jove, they do good work, and I'll give a shout out to the Knitting Nanas for that. So we have some of the Knitting Nanas from the original Northern Rivers, and they're all over the world now, so you can talk to them if you want to know about them. So what we mean is what I'm talking about is women working together with an analysis, a feminist analysis preferably, as I said. It doesn't always start that way. So it's all very well, just having a picnic. But if you call it a women's liberation picnic and you're looking at why it's so important for us to be together, it makes a bit of a difference than just sort of hanging out, like having a few quiches and stuff. Right, okay. And of course we know that real women eat quiche and make it too. First thing I ever made for my girlfriend wooing her was a quiche. Right, okay, so there's various feminist philosophies we know. Oh yes, I've got the stuff running here. So the focus for this discussion today is about us working together, not on individual activism, which often is very important, of course. But working together is... There we go, walk your talk. And apologies to Sheila, I think some of those heels are a little bit more than a centimetre tall, but you get your... it's great to be able to grab stuff off the web, isn't it? Just to make it interesting. So we're walking our talk. Let's have a look at the various spheres of our activism. So broadly, I've put it into sort of 3 groups. The broader spectrum is feminist analysis, feminist things we do, like International Women's Day, Reclaim the Night, things that have got a culture and a history, or history, but also protesting against governments and other organisations, what they're doing, or for law reform. Thank you, Helen. That was very important, what you've had to say today. And major public events, of course, which we can speak up about and protest. And, of course, particular issues like violence against women. And remember that 2021, enough justice for women marches all over Australia. Very important. But there's also the... other sphere of women's activism is about our communities and what we're doing for women specifically, like women's refuges, women's health, and our political groups, for instance, Women's Declaration International, which of course has a public face, but we're also speaking among ourselves and listening to people like Sheila. By the way, the women's rights book that you've got here is fantastic, and Sheila's introduction, if you don't do anything else, do yourself a favour and read that introduction. Learn it off by heart, actually. It's probably more important than the catechism, if you know what I'm talking about. A lot of people don't go to church these days, but we had it imposed on us, a bit like femininity, wasn't it, Sheila? Okay, so the third general sphere is women as actions in general movements. For instance, the Yes campaigns, 1967, you remember? Some of you were around in those days, for federal responsibility for Indigenous people in Australia. And the Yes campaigns, well, the lobbying for marriage equality, whether we believed in it or not, it was about legal equality. You can also say if you're a lesbian. Well, thanks, but no thanks, I don't have to do it. But before we didn't have that right. So the voice, I mean, a lot of feminists got up and identified as feminists in supporting the Voice campaign. Oh, that was supposed to be there, wasn't it? Here we go, quickly through. Right, look, this is just a few types of activism. It's endless, and there's a bit of a list on the back of your handout. And, I mean, you can think of others. Picnics. We used to have an IWD picnic in Lismore years ago because people like me got too tired of organising the march, so no one else would do it, so we had a picnic. So there's all sorts of things we can do. And we just tend to think about rallies or about hashtag activism, and I know there's a lot of very strong feminist stuff goes on the social media. I abstain myself, but that's another story. Letters and emails are really important, you know, to speak out, even if it's only a couple of comments underneath a news item, to say why we want something or why we don't want it or how it could be made better. So what have we got? Another list here. Yes, child sexual assault, all those kind of things. Complaints and litigation to ministry bodies and legal bodies, and the Melbourne's Lesbian Action Group, as we speak, are undertaking an appeal about exclusionary process from the Pride Centre, so-called. So I'm sure Caroline will fill you in on that. Street theatre. Oh yes, and did I put down street art? You know, in the 70s and 80s, we would have oh, this is going to be recorded, isn't it? Let's just say we used to see a lot of feminist graffiti around. And the third lot I've written up there, badges, wearable messages, great idea, you know, wear it with pride. So a few tips about organising here from the 50 years of slogging at it. So it is important, really, to have a feminist basis, not just we're here together and enjoying ourselves because we're women, but why? What it means for women to organise, why we see women as the focus, and women's views, and the process. And on this leaflet, I think I've got stuff about the focus and how to look after each other and be aware of each other when we're working together. So a bit to less individualism and more communalism when we're working together. Right, dealing with tensions and conflicts, things like that are inevitable, part of human nature. And so they're just a couple of tips. And how are we going for time? Not too bad.
I'll give you 2 hours. Could you start?
I've got the timer on my clock. I've got the stopwatch running. Okay, some of the issues we've acted on and we continue to act on. Whoops, hold on, back. So, there we go. So the motherhood statement, so to speak, is equality and equitable rights. Now someone said to me, oh, what do you mean by equity and equitable rights? Well, what I mean is this. Very often when we say equality, people think, oh, 50% men, 50% women. 50% young, 50% old. That's called form inequality. It's about mathematics or additions. No, we talk about substantive equality. So I'm sure a lot of you are up on this one, which means equality and fairness in outcome. So that is our sort of motherhood statement about why we're doing things. It may be about women in sport, it may be about tutorials at university, it may be about the neighbourhood centre that's got a silly little dunny for the women and a huge big one for the gents, usually with the doors open and smelling. So, yeah, where are we up to? There's a whole lot of things here. You can read them. Equal pay, workplace, very important. And Australia has led the world with workplace conditions and so on, and for equality, or attempt to equality. Abortion, inheritance and family rights. Once upon a time, the wife could be just left out of the will. Things have changed. And, yeah. Peace and anti-nuclear being a very big area for feminists across the world and in Australia. Environmental work, wildlife and other animals. So these are some of the things where we've been and we still are. Lesbian rights, support for Aboriginal and Islander rights and inclusion and respect, and land rights, of course. For people with a disability, there's a very strong feminist movement for women with a disability came out of Melbourne in the 80s and early 90s. General discrimination, harassment and victimisation, and of course we have equal opportunity departments around the place these days. Don't presume that there's a feminist analysis behind it. But if you find it isn't one, go for it. We've got to make them come clean, because there's some big biases there, unfortunately. You know, I taught human rights and equal opportunity at the uni, and wow, it was a bit of a shock. So housing, legal rights, all sorts of things. Right, now I'm going to take you... Oh, I've been there. All right, we're going to have a quiz now, and there's going to be prizes. And the prize will be some shoelaces to help you walk your talk. So there's 5 questions. 1928. What was a very prominent issue of women's activism?
Divorce laws. Divorce laws.
1928. Yes, she got it. First IWD march in Sydney, and one of the main issues was workplace conditions and equal pay. Thank you. And it was workers of the world and all kinds of really radical left-wing women. Now, if you were particularly there and you're one of the old stages of second wave, you may not want to yell out, be the first one to yell out the answers. We'll try some of the others out. 1967, there was a particular woman's leadership in this significant national campaign. 67. Some of us were... Speak up.
It's the referendum, I think.
Yep, what was the referendum for?
Oh, it was the removal of section 128 and the amendment to section 51 of the Constitution to... I won't go into legal.
Okay, she's a law student. Oh, she's a lawyer. Right, it was basically to give federal powers to rights and conditions for Aboriginal people. So give her some... Oh, the woman! Come on, what was her name? Faith Bandler. It was very important. I just want to say that a lot of people say 1967 was when Australia gave the vote to Aboriginal people. That is not true. Aboriginal people were included as voting in 1962 by an amendment to the federal electoral law.
And private federation in some colleges.
South Australia. South Australia, all women, including Indigenous women, had the vote in South Australia. So it was a bit of regression there. Oh, it's good to have another lawyer around, keep me on my toes. All right, 1969. She got it. Well, tell us what she did, though. Tell us.
She changed herself to the front door of the Commonwealth.
The Commonwealth Arbitration Building for the Equal Right. So there was Zelda. Zelda de Prano did it on the 21st of October, and on the 31st of October she was joined by Alva Geekie, who's a mate of mine who lives around the corner, and Thelma Solomon, who's RIP, and there were 3 of them. And Alva, for those of you who may be interested, has just pulled together all her documents, minutes of meetings, and they call themselves the Women's Action Group, and later they said, well, actually, it's Women's Liberation. And she's put together this book as a reference kind of book, and it's been, it was launched yesterday in Melbourne by the Women's Trust. So it's not a book you buy, it's a reference book. So it's very important, and I gave her a bit of editorial assistance, and it was great fun reading these minutes of the old days. Right, now moving on to 1983, was a big movement, international, but there was an Australian, it wasn't particularly legal like, I mean there were legal aspects, took on the international powers. 1983. No, it was earlier than that.
We signed the CEDAW.
No, it's not a legal thing, specifically. Who was out in the desert in Central Australia? Come on, women. Women's Pine Gap. Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Women's Pine Gap. It was a really, really big demo. And women from all over Australia were there. I mean, feminists, non-feminists, Christian ladies, all sorts of people. Aboriginal women came out, oh, this is great. People understand where we're at. And there was Pine Gap, you know, the American anti-nuclear blah, blah. They broke the gate down and so on. So, Jean, was that you? Do you get a pair of shoelaces? Yes. Well, maybe you'd like to give one to someone else. Give them to your best. Now, oh, well, I can't read this. Who wrote this? Must have been me. Oh, it stopped.
There we go.
Oh.
Go back. There we go.
2021. Oh, I did mention it already. What was it?
Women's March
For what?
for Justice.
Women's March for Justice. What happened? It was all over Australia. There were over 100 marches. We even had one in Lismore, didn't we?
She was the young woman who was sexually assaulted in Rosemont.
In?
The young woman who was sexually assaulted in Parliament. That's Brittany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the kind of litmus that would have been boiling along for a while. So I guess you're going to have some shoelaces to help you activate your activism. Okay, so this is going to be the first time in history that I'm finishing under time. All right, just a few little words now, a little bit of a tutorial. So what do we mean by the women's liberation movement? It's about active. Movement is about moving, not just sitting there going, oh yeah, ain't it awful? There's been too much of ain't it awful. It's now we're going to do something, and we're going to do it together, and we're going to do it with a feminist analysis. So we're trying to get change. We get some change, and sometimes things go backwards too. Do we want reform? Oh, well, look, we won't have... We'll just make sure we've got 50% women on the committee. It'll be all right. Well, will it? Maybe the blokes have got their girlfriends to go on the committee. Whatever. Or do we want revolution? Women's liberation is a revolutionary movement. We want thorough change. Think about it. We don't want to replicate all the old stuff. Think about it. So, thorough and far-reaching change. Movement equals activism. Stand up, speak up. Don't be afraid. And if we don't speak up, who will? Don't leave it to someone else. And this is one of my favourites. So Rosie's getting on, isn't she? We're doing all right, us oldies. I'll be 80 next birthday. All right. It's so true. When we're empowered, we empower each other. And we do it together. So thank you very much, and I think I'm under time. Is that a record?